Hey, okay, so we are jumping right in like we did last week. We did the same thing last week because we have like five. A lot of times we do like what, like three?
Three or
And
four,
we give them, yeah, three or four, and we give them like a really good chunk of time because they usually need them. But there's just so much stuff. There's so much stuff. So right off the bat, we're talking about RFK gaining momentum. How about that? That's not a surprise. It's not a
No.
surprise, right? I mean, it's no surprise at all. So we want to look at like the big implications of that. And it's pretty interesting, maybe not surprising for a lot of people, but the Dems they're freaking out. They're freaking out. It's kind of funny. Funny, right?
Yeah, I mean, this started a couple of months ago. You and I, kind of figured out that this was going to be an issue when President Biden refused Secret Service protection for RFK. Remember when that happened? And we were like, okay, well, that's an issue there. And we've kind of kept an eye on him. He's been kind of simmering in the background and waiting for, the Republican Party to shrink its field down to what we inevitably knew was going to happen, which is, President Trump as the candidate. And so here we sit, right? We've got President Biden, we've got President Trump, and we've got RFK Jr. And, he's running as an independent. And so the big news is he announced his vice presidential candidate. And, what do we know about her?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton. She's a Silicon Valley philanthropist, Nicole Shanahan. She's 38 years old, very young. And she has been, out of the political arena. This is not her lane. She's obviously, very on board with Kennedy's ideas and sentiments. I mean, they're in sync. Yeah, I mean, she's interesting. She's interesting. There was some big criticism of her though.
She's loaded. Her husband, her ex-husband, was one of the founders of Google.
Yes.
So in the divorce settlement, she, as we would all assume, got a ton of money.
Yes.
Now, Supreme Court ruled in, I think it was in the 70s, like 76 maybe, that your personal, and this is what President Trump did too, your personal finance as a candidate, you can spend it however you want. So there's no limitation on you spending your own money to run for office. There's no campaign rules against it. It actually falls under free speech, which I thought was amazing, that it fell under the First Amendment. But as she runs for office now, RFK, as an independent, I mean, obviously, President Trump, and we're going to talk about fundraising in a minute, but President Trump and President Biden have the coffers, the war chests of the parties to rely upon, which RFK doesn't. But what he does have is a vice presidential candidate with a crap ton of money that they now
Girl's got bank. Yeah,
she already paid $4 million. She financed $4 million for his Super Bowl commercial, which obviously I think is where the attention came and what put her on his radar to potentially become his vice, and now is his vice presidential candidate.
Yep. Yeah. And the Dems are like we said, they're going bonkers. They're going batshit crazy over it. They've got super PACs, more than one, devoted to crushing third-party candidates. Let's see what else. Democratic National Committee, mobile billboards. They troll Kennedy at events, and party donors are funding legal efforts to try and keep him off the ballot. So they're pulling out all the stops. They're shaking in their shoes. And that's interesting. And he's interesting, of course, in many, many ways. But one of them is that he has, and correct me if I'm wrong, he has actually said favorable things about Trump. He's not anti-Trump. He's calling, Biden the biggest threat to this country. So he's aiming his guns that way, and he's not aiming them towards Trump, which leads me to question. And now, mind you, Clay and our viewers, I'm not a political analyst. I don't know a lot of these things. So don't come for me when I ask this question. Is there a possibility that when it came down to it, that Trump could ever pick Kennedy as a running mate? Can that happen in the sphere of anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not.
Right.
I think, declaring there may be some rules about him declaring as an independent, running as an independent if he drops out of the race, and then, I honestly don't see him switching parties,
Right.
because he is a
Agreed.
Democrat at heart. I mean, he is a Kennedy. He's actually
Right.
one of his big criticisms of President Biden is that his family, the famous Kennedys, right?
Mhm.
And we're not talking about drunk Teddy, right? We're
No.
talking about, Jack and Bobby would be
Yeah.
ashamed of what the Democratic Party has become, and especially
Yes.
what President Biden is doing in the White House. He's not shy about saying that.
Right.
I don't, as I think your point of, he's favorable, not necessarily favorable, but he doesn't slam Trump, he doesn't slander him, he doesn't go after him like the rest of the
Mhm.
Democratic Party.
Mhm.
But I don't see him switching parties to be a VP candidate for Trump. I don't see
Okay.
that happening. Yeah.
Mhm. I could see where it would be desirable though
Oh,
for the
sure.
people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that could appease a lot of anti-Trumpers, and could appeal. I mean, because he's got a big, what he's pulling away from Biden is, and I think you mentioned this last week, he's pulling away young Black voters, right? Young voters in general, I believe, but specifically voters of color. So
Yep.
that's a big threat. That's a big threat.
Yeah. And it's so when he announced Shanahan as his vice presidential candidate,
Hmm.
like you said, the Dems went into full freak out mode, right? There were
Right.
memos sent. There were because I think they weren't taking him very seriously because he just wasn't going to be able to financially survive. Right. I
Right.
think we're just kind of like, okay, well, we'll give him till, June at latest, and then he'll be gone because he'll shot his wad. He won't have any money. Well, now that, things have changed. So now it's a significant, emotional event for them to deal with him because, and I had forgotten about this. We've talked about Ross Perot and his effect on the 92
Right.
election, right? He essentially split enough of the Republican Party to put Bill Clinton into office. Right.
Yes.
It's arguable. Yeah. Some people will go back and revisionist history and say, no, he didn't have that much effect, blah, 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 blah. But he actually, Ross Perot was actually winning in the polls at one point in time. Forget that. But anyway, so we've talked about Ross Perot as a third party candidate having an effect on the election.
Right.
I had forgotten about this until I was reading, maybe it was Saturday. I was reading, was it Nader? I think it was Ralph Nader in 2000. Was running, and he's the one who caused the recount in Florida between Bush Gore.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Wow.
So now you've got, and so that of course lost the election that lost Florida and eventually lost the Electoral College votes for Florida for Gore, which lost the election. So now you've got, the Democratic Party is in a little bit of a freak out mode because they know that it's these states, it's the battleground states that are going to be the problem, because if they're that close, the estimate is Trump's not losing his base to RFK. Right. It's Biden that's losing his base to RFK.
Yeah.
And
and obviously the proof in that is which one is freaking out. If there's, if you need to wonder who's got the most to lose from that, from a third party candidate, obviously it's the one who's going nuts.
And listen, I've seen numbers as high as 60% of the voting public right now doesn't want either one of them.
Wow.
Right? They don't want.
Well, yeah,
they
absolutely.
don't want Biden or Trump. Right? Up to 6. I've seen as high as 60%. Right? Most of the polls I've seen are in the low 50s. It's still 50%. Right?
That's a big chunk.
It's still a lot of people. So
you can't disregard that.
No. So what you've got is a viable. Listen, Kennedy's never going to win. He's never going to win. But what he is going to do is affect the election, and we've been saying that for a long time. But I think with this infusion of cash that he just got with his vice president, and he was talking about some cool people not cool, but he was talking about some interesting people as vice president, right? Aaron Rodgers and Jesse Ventura and some other folks, and all of a sudden he pulls this lady out of thin air, and of course it's because she's got the cash.
She's got the money.
Yeah,
she's got the money, honey, right?
Yep. She's also anti-vaccine like he is.
Right.
So that, there are some, you said it when we kind of started, there's some overlap in their views. I don't think she's necessarily hardline. I think she's probably a little further left than he is, which is a little weird, but
right. Yeah.
but there are some very strict issues or hardline issues that they're in line with.
Yeah, I can't remember for the life of me what it was, but there was something about her, and maybe one of our viewers, listeners can chime in here if they know. There was something about her that was intensely off-putting, that disappointed a lot of RFK Jr. Fans, followers, supporters, whatever you want to call them. There was something about her that was a big deal, and I don't know what it was. So I will find it, or one of you will find it and put it in the comments for us. But yeah, darn, it makes me so mad when I can't remember what it is. But either way, it's very interesting. I'm just curious, do you think he's gone into this? And I know it's really impossible to get inside somebody else's mind and their mindset, but I'm just curious, do you think like he's come into this also knowing full well he's not going to win? He's just going to do enough to really stir the pot and jolt everything. What do you think?
Yeah, I no third-party independent candidates ever won.
Right.
So, in fact, no third-party candidate has ever carried a state and won in electoral votes. So, but he is from that family, right? I do believe, and I know that this goes against everything I believe about politicians, but I think deep down inside, there is a touch of altruism in what he's trying to do. I really do believe that he thinks that it's the right thing to do for the country, that he, carrying on his family's legacy and the name and everything it stands for and has stood for in the past. I do believe that in his heart of hearts, he thinks he's doing the right thing. But I also think that he knows, when the room is quiet and the lights are out and he's sitting there by himself, he knows he's not going to win. So he's doing what he's doing what he can, like you said, to affect the election in what he thinks is the best way possible for the country, which is to keep Biden out of office.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, man, Biden Harris, I mean, what more can you say about everything except for that? And really, actually, the icing on the cake of those two names, that imagery is honestly, Biden's bad enough, but the very thought of her in that seat should be making everyone ill, ill. And you don't hear, there's certainly factions of people who are, still riding that whole, she could be the first Black female Indian president of the United, doing all of the things. They're always going to have that crowd that is all they hyper focus on. They don't care about anything else. They certainly exist, but you don't hear them a lot. You really don't. That is not a big, loud chant that you're hearing, like you would be hearing if it were Michelle Obama, for example.
She is not the champion that they wanted. Believe me.
No.
That is not. She becomes the first anything in any of those realms, like that. It will be an embarrassment, and I think even the people on her side will be like, "Eesh, boy, we slid into that one." Yeah, I don't think nobody wants that. I've never seen or heard a single person that's like, "Man, I really hope she ends up as the president." Nobody.
And that is really, like, when you actually stop for a minute and think about that, you're talking about a party whose whole existence is on identity politics and, racial everything. Like that's their baby right there. And that they can't push this woman forward in good conscience. Not that they actually have good conscience, but in any kind of conscience themselves tells you a lot. So